Jake Morrison had been sitting in the same chair for 3 hours. The Galactic Council meeting room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up like a theater. Each alien species had their own section. The Zelkari sat in the front row, their purple skin glowing under the bright lights. They were tall and thin, with 4 arms and eyes that never seemed to blink. Behind them sat the Vorthak, who looked like walking crystals. They made soft ringing sounds when they moved. The hive queens were in another section, their insect bodies clicking and buzzing as they talked to each other. The luminal collective didn't really have bodies at all. They were just balls of light, floating in special containers. Jake was the only human in the room. He wore his best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with gold buttons. His name tag said Ambassador Morrison, Terran Federation. He had been Earth's voice in the Galactic Council for 8 years now. 8 long years of sitting through meetings, where aliens talked about humans like they weren't there. Today was worse than usual. Commander Zex of the Zelkari Empire was speaking again. His voice was deep and rough like rocks grinding together. "The humans continue to show their weakness," Zex said, waving one of his 4 arms. "They speak of peace when they should show strength. Their soft flesh makes them unfit for the harsh realities of space." Some of the other aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Jake kept his face calm, but his hands were tight on the arms of his chair. He had heard these insults before, many times. The humans were weak. The humans were soft. The humans didn't belong with the strong races of the galaxy. Amy Carter sat behind Jake, taking notes on her electronic pad. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and quick fingers. She had been Jake's assistant for 2 years. Amy noticed things that others missed. She saw patterns in the way aliens acted. She knew that something was building up, getting worse each month. Amy watched. Commander Zex, as he spoke, the Zelkari had been getting bolder lately. They used to just make fun of humans in the council meetings. Now they were doing things in space. Real things. Dangerous things. 3 weeks ago, a human cargo ship called the Star Dancer had been stopped by Zelkari patrol ships. The Zelkari said the humans were in their space without permission. The human captain showed his legal permits, but the Zelkari took the ship anyway. 23 human crew members spent 5 days in Zelkari prison cells before the council made them let the humans go. 2 weeks ago, it happened again. The merchant ship Golden Hope was seized near the outer rim. This time, the Zelkari kept the ship and all its cargo. They said the humans were smuggling weapons. The humans weren't smuggling weapons. Amy had seen the cargo manifest. It was farming equipment for a new colony. Last week, 3 human exploration ships were forced to turn back from an empty star system. The Zelkari claimed the system was theirs, even though no one lived there. The human ships had to go home without completing their mission. Each time, Jake had stood up in the council and asked for justice. Each time, the other aliens had listened politely and done nothing. The Vorthak said they needed more time to study the situation. The Hive Queens said it wasn't their problem. The Luminal Collective said they didn't want to take sides. "Commander," Zex was still talking. "Humans think they can explore our galaxy without proving themselves worthy," he said. "They have no honor, no courage. They run from every fight and hide behind their words." Jake felt something hot building in his chest. He had been a diplomat for 12 years. Before that, he had been a soldier. He knew how to fight. All humans knew how to fight. They just chose not to most of the time. There was a difference between being unable to fight and choosing not to fight. The aliens didn't seem to understand that difference. Amy's pad buzzed softly. She looked down and her face went pale. She leaned forward and whispered in Jake's ear. "Sir, we just got a priority message from Earth Command." Jake turned slightly. "What is it?" "The New Horizons, sir. She's missing." Jake felt his stomach drop. The New Horizons was a colony ship. A big one. She was carrying 40,000 people to a new world called Haven's Rest. Families, children, scientists, engineers. People looking for a new life on a distant planet. "Missing how?" Jake whispered. "Back." Amy's hand shook slightly as she read from her pad. "She sent a distress signal 3 days ago. Captain Ben Richards reported Zelkari warships surrounding his position. The signal cut off. Our patrol ships found the location yesterday. And Amy's voice was barely a whisper. Debris, sir. Escape. Pods all empty. No survivors found yet. Jake stared ahead at Commander Zex, who was still talking about human weakness. 40,000 people. 40,000 innocent people who had done nothing wrong except try to find a new home. Men, women, children, elderly people, babies. All gone. The hot feeling in Jake's chest was getting bigger. His hands were shaking now. He had been patient for 8 years. The human government had been patient for 300 years since first contact. They had absorbed insults. They had ignored threats. They had turned the other cheek when aliens pushed them around. 40,000 people. Jake stood up slowly. The room went quiet. It was unusual for a human to interrupt a Zelkari speaker. It was considered rude. Jake didn't care about rude anymore. Commander Zex stopped talking and turned his 4 eyes toward Jake. The human wishes to speak, he said, with what might have been amusement. Jake walked down to the speaking platform in the center of the room. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every alien in the room was watching him. Amy followed behind, still holding her electronic pad. Jake reached the platform and turned to face the assembled aliens. He looked up at Commander Zex first, then slowly turned his gaze to each section of seats. The Vorthak crystals were ringing, softly. The Hive Queens had stopped their buzzing. Even the Luminal Collective seemed to be paying attention. Jake pulled out his own electronic pad and placed it on the speaker's podium. His hands had stopped shaking. His voice was steady when he spoke, but there was something in it that hadn't been there before. Something that made the aliens lean forward in their seats. The Terran Federation formally requests an immediate investigation into the massacre of 40,000 human civilians, Jake said. The word massacre seemed to hang in the air like a physical thing. For the first time in 300 years of human diplomacy, Ambassador Jake Morrison wasn't asking politely. He was demanding, and every alien in that room could hear the difference. Colonel Lisa Hayes was watching her soldiers practice combat drills when her communication device started beeping. The red light meant urgent message from Earth Command. She pressed her thumb against the scanner and waited for the encryption to clear. The message was short, just 4 words and a code. Condition yellow. Prepare escalation. Lisa had been expecting this message for months. She was in charge of the 3rd Marine Battalion on Mars Base Alpha. Her soldiers were good fighters, but they had been doing peacekeeping missions for years, helping colonies, rescuing lost ships, building schools on new worlds. They hadn't fought a real war in decades. Lisa looked out at the red landscape of Mars. Her base was built into the side of a mountain. 3,000 Marines lived and trained here. They had the best equipment, the best weapons, the best training. But the galaxy didn't know that. The aliens thought humans were soft because they chose to be peaceful. She walked to her office and sealed the door. Then she opened her private communication channel to Earth. The face that appeared on her screen was familiar. General Frank Morrison, Jake's older brother. Frank looked tired. His gray hair was messy and he had dark circles under his eyes. Lisa, Frank said, "You got my message." "Yes, sir. What's the situation?" Frank's expression was grim. "The New Horizons is gone. 40,000 civilians. The Zelkari killed them all and left the bodies floating in space." Lisa felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had friends on that ship. Good people who just wanted a new life on a distant world. Evidence? Plenty. The Zelkari didn't even try to hide it. They're bragging about it on their military channels. They think they're showing the galaxy how weak humans are. Lisa sat down hard in her chair. Orders? Prepare your people. This isn't going to end with diplomacy. The president is meeting with the Joint Chiefs right now. We're going to show the galaxy what humans can really do. The communication ended. Lisa stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then she activated the base-wide communication system. All unit commanders report to Briefing Room 7 immediately. This is not a drill. On Earth, President John Taylor, was sitting at the head of a long table in the war room deep under the White House. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders in human space. General Morrison was there, along with Admiral Kate Williams from the Space Navy and General Bob Clark from the Air Force. The walls of the room were covered with screens showing star maps, fleet positions, and intelligence reports. The Zelkari. Empire controlled 12 star systems. They had a powerful military with fast ships and deadly weapons. They had been the dominant force in their sector of space for over 200 years. "Show me what we're dealing with," President Taylor said. "General," Morrison activated the main display. A three-dimensional map of Zelkari space appeared in the center of the table. Red dots showed Zelkari military bases. Blue dots showed their major colonies. Yellow lines showed their patrol routes. "The Zelkari have been studying our military history," General Morrison said. "But they've been looking at the wrong wars. They analyzed Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, conflicts where we showed restraint, where we tried to minimize civilian casualties, where we followed rules of engagement." He touched a control and the display changed. Now it showed older conflicts: World War II, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. "They don't understand what happens when we stop holding back," General Morrison continued. "When we decide that the enemy needs to be completely destroyed, not just defeated." Admiral Williams leaned forward. "What are our fleet positions, General?" Morrison smiled for the first time that day. "That's the beauty of it. We've been quietly positioning ships for months. The aliens think we're just doing routine maintenance and training exercises. They have no idea that we have 48 capital ships within striking distance of their homeworld." President Taylor studied the display. "What about the other alien species? Will they interfere?" Dr. Susan Blake, the Federation's expert on alien psychology, spoke up from her seat near the end of the table. "Unlikely, Mr. President. The Vorthak are too cautious to get involved in a conflict between other species. The Hive Queens only care about protecting their own colonies. The Luminal Collective doesn't have physical ships that could threaten us. What about after we destroy the Zelkari?" President Taylor asked. "How will the other aliens react?" Dr. Blake was quiet for a moment. "They'll be terrified, sir. Right now they see humans as weak because we choose not to fight. Once they see what we can do when we stop choosing peace, everything will change. The entire power structure of the galaxy will shift overnight." General Morrison brought up another display. This one showed human military capabilities that had been kept secret from the aliens. Stealth technology that could make entire fleets invisible, weapons that could crack planets in half, artificial intelligence systems that could predict enemy movements before they happened. "We've been hiding our true strength for 3 centuries, he said. "The aliens think they know what human technology can do. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Captain Rick Stone was aboard his ship, the UFS Vengeance, when he received his new orders. He had been patrolling the Outer Rim for 6 months, dealing with pirates and smugglers, boring work for a warship designed to fight major battles. The orders were encrypted with the highest security codes. Rick read them twice to make sure he understood. Then he called his senior officers to the bridge. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, looking at the faces of his crew, "our patrol mission is over. We've been recalled to join the main battle fleet. Combat operations will begin within 72 hours. His weapons officer, Commander Alex Turner, raised an eyebrow. "Combat operations against who, sir?" "The Zelkari Empire. All of it." The bridge went quiet. Rick's crew had been together for years. They were professional soldiers, but they had never fought a real war. Neither had their parents or grandparents. Humanity had been at peace for decades. "Sir," his navigator said quietly, "the Zelkari have one of the most powerful militaries in the galaxy." Rick smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "They think they do. They're about to learn the difference between being powerful and thinking you're powerful." Back on Mars, Colonel Hayes was briefing her senior staff. The room was packed with Marine officers, all of them looking serious. Maps of Zelkari worlds covered the walls. "The Zelkari want to see what humans are capable of in war," Hayes said. "We're going to show them. But this won't be like the peacekeeping missions you're used to. This will be total war. No rules of engagement. No concern for enemy civilian. Casualties, no mercy. One of her captains raised his hand. Ma'am, that's not how humans usually fight. Hayes looked at him steadily. No, it's not. Usually we try to minimize suffering. Usually we try to protect innocent people. Usually we show restraint and mercy. She paused. The Zelkari murdered 40,000 innocent humans. They forfeited any right to our usual mercy. The room was silent. These were good soldiers, but they had been trained to be peacekeepers. The idea of fighting without restraint was new to them. I know this is different, Hayes continued, but the Zelkari have spent months testing our patience. They think our restraint comes from weakness. They're about to learn that our restraint comes from choice, and we're choosing not to show restraint anymore. Across human space, similar conversations were happening. Ships were moving into position. Soldiers were preparing for war. Weapons that had been stored for decades were being brought out and checked. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The aliens had studied human military history, but they had studied the wrong parts. They had seen human restraint and mistaken it for weakness. They were about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped being patient. The age of human diplomacy was ending. The age of human warfare was about to begin. The first thing the Zelkari noticed was the silence. Human diplomats stopped talking in the middle of trade negotiations. Human ships began leaving alien ports without explanation. Ambassador Jake Morrison evacuated Zerion Station with his entire staff, refusing to answer questions from confused alien officials. Commander Zex was in his office on Zelkar Prime when his communication officer brought him the reports. Sir, all human diplomatic contact has ceased across the galaxy. Their ambassadors are returning to human space. Zex made a sound that was like laughter. The weak humans are running away. They know they cannot stand against the mighty Zelkari Empire. What Zex didn't know was that 48 human warships were already moving through hyperspace toward his homeworld. Admiral Kate Williams stood on the bridge of the UFS Retribution, watching the countdown timer on the main screen. In 30 minutes, they would drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zelkar system. All ships report ready, Admiral, her communication officer said. Kate nodded. She had been in the Space Navy for 25 years. She had fought pirates and rescued stranded colonists. She had never fought a real war against a major alien power. None of them had, but they had trained for this moment their entire careers. Signal the fleet, she said. All ships, you are weapons free. Rules of engagement are suspended. Show them what humans do when we stop being nice. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. The Zelkari defense stations detected them immediately and began screaming warnings across all communication channels. But something was wrong with their sensors. The readings made no sense. According to the sensors, there were only 12 human ships. But visual confirmation showed 48 massive warships arranged in perfect attack formation. The humans had been using stealth technology that made most of their fleet invisible to Zelkari detection systems. Impossible, whispered the Zelkari defense commander as he watched the human fleet spread out around his planet. Intelligence reports said humans only had primitive military technology. Commander Alex Turner was leading the first wave of human fighters. His squadron of 30 ships dove toward the Zelkari orbital defense platforms. These were huge structures, each one as big as a city, bristling with weapons and shields. The Zelkari had built these platforms to protect their homeworld from any possible attack. They were considered invincible. Each platform could destroy an entire fleet by itself. The Zelkari were confident that no enemy could get past their orbital defenses. They were wrong. Alex's fighters moved in patterns that no alien had ever seen before. They didn't follow the predictable attack formations that the Zelkari had studied from human military history. These were new tactics, developed in secret over decades of preparation. The human fighters seemed to dance between the defensive laser blasts. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Zelkari had encountered. Worse, their weapons were far more powerful than intelligence reports had suggested. The first orbital platform exploded in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. Then the second. Then the third. Within an hour, all 12 platforms were destroyed. The Zelkari homeworld lay defenseless before the human fleet. On the planet below, Commander Zex was shouting orders to his staff. Get the planetary defense grid online. Launch all available ships. Contact the other council species for assistance. His communication officer looked up from his console with terror in his 4 eyes. Sir, the other species are not responding. To our calls, they say this is not their fight. What about our fleet? Admiral Vork's battle group tried to engage the human ships. They were destroyed in 12 minutes. Complete destruction, sir. No survivors. Zex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Real deep fear that made his purple skin turn pale. The mighty Zelkari military, which had dominated this sector of space for centuries, was being crushed by the species they had mocked as weak and soft. Captain Rick Stone brought his ship, the UFS Vengeance, into the planet's atmosphere. This was something that wasn't supposed to be possible. Warships were too big and heavy to operate inside a planetary atmosphere. They were designed for space combat only, but human technology had advanced far beyond what the aliens knew. The Vengeance could fight in space, in atmosphere, or even underwater if necessary. Rick's mission was simple: destroy every military installation on the planet's surface. The Zelkari had hundreds of military bases, army headquarters, naval shipyards, weapons factories, training academies. Rick's orders were to eliminate all of them, not capture them, not disable them, destroy them completely. Target the main naval shipyard, Rick told his weapons officer. Full power. The beam that lanced down from the Vengeance was blue-white and as bright as a star. It struck the shipyard and vaporized everything in a 10-mile radius. The explosion could be felt on the other side of the planet. Next target, sir? The weapons officer asked. All of them, Rick said quietly. Every single one. Colonel Lisa Hayes led the ground assault on the capital city. Her Marines landed in drop pods that came down like meteors. The Zelkari army tried to stop them, but it was hopeless. The human soldiers moved with a cold efficiency that broke Zelkari morale within hours. These weren't the peacekeeping forces the galaxy was familiar with. These were warriors unleashed, following orders to end the conflict permanently. They advanced through the city like a machine, destroying everything that could support the Zelkari war effort. The Zelkari soldiers had been trained to fight other Zelkari. They were used to battles where both sides followed similar tactics and used similar weapons. They had no idea how to fight humans who ignored all conventional military doctrine. Sir, one of Lisa's sergeants reported over the radio, the enemy is requesting surrender. Tell them they should have thought of that before they murdered 40,000 civilians, Lisa replied. Keep advancing. The war lasted 6 days. 6 days of systematic destruction that left the Zelkari Empire completely broken. Their fleet was gone. Their military bases were rubble. Their government had fled to bunkers deep underground. On the 6th day, Admiral Williams received a transmission from the underground bunkers. It was Commander Zex, though he looked nothing like the proud warrior who had mocked humans in the Galactic Council. His purple skin was gray with fear. His 4 arms were shaking. We surrender, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Please, we surrender unconditionally. Stop the attack. Admiral Williams looked at the transmission for a long moment. Then she opened a channel to all human forces. All units, cease fire. The enemy has surrendered. Begin occupation procedures. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the reports came in. The Zelkari Empire, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, had been completely destroyed in less than a week. Not defeated, not weakened, utterly annihilated. The other alien species who had watched the Zelkari bully humans for months suddenly realized they had made a terrible mistake. They had mistaken human restraint for weakness. They had thought human patience meant humans couldn't fight. They were wrong. Human patience wasn't weakness, it was a choice. And now they understood what happened when humans chose to stop being patient. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. The soft, weak humans who had been mocked and bullied were actually the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered. They had been holding back for 3 centuries, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Now everyone knew what humans were really capable of when they stopped wanting to be peaceful. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human dominance had begun, and every species in the galaxy would remember the day human patience finally snapped. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled, but no one was talking. The alien representatives sat in their sections, watching the main screen with expressions of fear and shock. The screen showed images from Zelkar Prime. Burned cities, destroyed military bases. Zelkari survivors being loaded onto transport ships. President John Taylor walked to the speaker's platform. He was not Ambassador Morrison with his diplomatic smile and patient words. This was the leader of humanity, and every alien in the room could feel the difference. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he reached the center of the chamber. Taylor looked up at the assembled representatives. The Vorthak crystals were completely still, not making their usual ringing sounds. The hive queens had stopped their buzzing and clicking. Even the luminal collective seemed dimmer than usual. For 300 years, Taylor said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, humanity chose patience, we chose diplomacy. We chose to absorb your insults and endure your provocations because we believed in peaceful coexistence. He paused, letting his words sink in. Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That patience was not weakness, Taylor continued. It was a gift you threw away when you murdered 40,000 innocent people. Now you will learn what humans are capable of when we stop giving gifts. The words became the most quoted speech in galactic history. Every news service in known space broadcast it. Every alien leader watched it multiple times. Children in alien schools would study it for generations to come. Back on Zelkar Prime, Colonel Lisa Hayes was overseeing the occupation of the capital city. Her Marines patrolled the streets in their armored vehicles. Zelkari civilians watched from their windows with fearful eyes. The proud alien warriors who had once mocked human weakness now hurried out of the way when they saw human soldiers approaching. The Zelkari government had been completely dismantled. Commander Zex and his senior officers were being held in a detention center outside the city. They would face trial for the murder of the New Horizons passengers. The punishment would be severe. "Colonel," one of her sergeants reported, "we've finished cataloging the weapon stockpiles. They had enough firepower to attack 6 different star systems simultaneously." Lisa nodded grimly. "And they chose to use it against civilian ships. Destroy it all. Every weapon, every piece of military equipment. I don't want them capable of threatening anyone ever again." The news of the Zelkari defeat spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Trade routes that had operated for centuries suddenly changed. Merchant ships that had once traveled freely through Zelkari space now had to request permission from human authorities. Captain Rick Stone was commanding the orbital defense station above Zelkar Prime. His job was to make sure no one tried to help the surviving Zelkari military escape. But mostly he watched the steady stream of ships arriving from human space. These weren't warships. They were cargo vessels, construction ships, and transport craft. Humans were moving in to take control of the former Zelkari territories. They brought engineers to rebuild the destroyed cities. They brought teachers to establish new schools. They brought administrators to create a new government. But they also brought soldiers. Lots of soldiers. The message was clear to anyone watching. Humans were here to stay. Admiral Kate Williams was in her office aboard the Retribution when she received a communication from the Vorthak Assembly. The crystalline beings wanted to discuss mutual cooperation and understanding. It was the first time in galactic history that the Vorthak had initiated contact with another species. The Hive Queens sent a similar message. So did the Luminal Collective. Suddenly, every major alien power wanted to be friends with humanity. They offered trade agreements, military alliances, and technology-sharing deals. Williams forwarded all the messages to Earth Command with a single comment. There, Scared, Ambassador Jake Morrison returned to Zarion Station 3 months after the war ended. But everything was different now. The aliens who had once ignored him now hung on his every word. The Vorthak representative actually stood up when Jake entered the council chamber. The Hive Queen delegation made respectful clicking sounds. Even the arrogant species who had never acknowledged human presence now treated Jake like the most important person in the galaxy. The Terran Federation is willing to discuss new trade agreements, Jake said during his first speech back to the council, but the terms will be different from before. Humanity will no longer accept second-class status in galactic affairs. No one argued. No one complained. The aliens who had spent centuries treating humans as junior partners now competed with each other to offer the best deals. The Zelkari survivors were relocated to 3 small planets in their former territory. The worlds were adequate for their needs, but they would never again be a threat to anyone. Human administrators oversaw their colonies. Human teachers educated their children about the consequences of bullying peaceful species. Commander Zex was sentenced to life imprisonment for his role in the New Horizons massacre. During his trial, he was asked if he understood why humans had reacted so strongly to the attack on their civilians. "No," he said, his voice broken and defeated. "We thought you were weak. We thought you would accept the loss and move on like you always did before." The human judge looked at him with cold eyes. "That's where you made your mistake. Humans protect their own. When you attack our families, our children, our innocent people, you see what we're really like underneath all the diplomacy." The trial was broadcast across the galaxy. Every alien who watched it learned the same lesson. Humans were not weak. They were not soft. They had been choosing to be peaceful, and that choice could be taken away. Years passed. The galaxy adapted to the new reality where humans were the dominant military power. Trade flourished under human protection. Pirates and raiders found themselves facing human patrol fleets that showed no mercy. Disputes between alien species were settled quickly by human mediators who had the military strength to enforce their decisions. Some aliens complained privately about human dominance, but they were careful to keep their complaints very private. No one wanted to be the next species to discover what happened when humans stopped being patient. Dr. Susan Blake published a famous study about the psychological impact of the war on galactic civilization. She called it the patience paradigm. Her research showed that every major alien species had fundamentally changed their behavior after witnessing human military capabilities. Before the war, she wrote, aliens saw human restraint as evidence of weakness. After the war, they understand that human restraint is evidence of strength. Only the truly powerful can choose to be peaceful. The human military maintained bases throughout the former Zelkari territory, but they also established new diplomatic academies, teaching courses on conflict resolution and peaceful coexistence. The message was clear. Humans preferred peace, but they were fully prepared for war. Ambassador Morrison often thought about that day in the council chamber when he had demanded justice for the New Horizons victims. That had been the moment when 3 centuries of human patience finally ran out. That had been the moment when the galaxy learned what humans were really capable of. Now, when alien children learned about galactic history, they were taught about the species that had been patient for 300 years until someone pushed them too far. They learned about the humans who preferred peace, but were devastatingly effective at war. They learned about the day when human patience finally snapped. And they learned never to make the same mistake the Zelkari had made. The age of human patience was over. The age of human leadership had begun, and everyone in the galaxy remembered exactly when and why it had happened. Everyone remembers when human patience finally snapped. More importantly, everyone remembers what came after.